But Samuel, man, it's an absolutely pleasure to have you here today, man.
It's a pleasure to be here,
Yeah,
Francis. Yeah, it's not often I get invited to sit down and talk in a relaxed environment
yeah,
without 100 people or 4 or 5 people who are
yeah.
clients. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
You're used to all the big meetings, innit? That's why it's a slightly a bit different setting to you,
Yeah,
innit? To
yeah,
your usual stuff, yeah.
yeah. Is speaking to a camera, to a mic is
Yeah,
is a bit different, but at the end of the day, where I can offer value, it's always an honor. And again, obviously, to work with like-minded people, people that are forward thinking for others. That for me, that's my heart, to give value. So yeah, it's a
yeah,
pleasure to be here.
most definitely. And that's one of the main reasons why I have you here today, because in the last couple of weeks, we've kind of been in touch a bit more than we had previously since we got introduced to each other,
Yeah,
maybe a couple of years back, wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah, and you've truly inspired me in that short period of time that we've spoken. And obviously, we're going to get into the reasons why and what you do. So can you just break down who are you and what is it exactly that you do, so the public or the audience or the listeners get a great understanding?
Excellent. So my name's Samuel Ikhinmwin. I'm known most of the time from the acronym or the name Samuel Ikhinmwin.
Dope.
And the reason why is because I'm quite prolific on social media,
Yeah.
Facebook. You can catch me on Instagram, simply Ikhinmwin. And basically, I'm an entrepreneur effectively in the simplest sense. People have called me a pastor because my heart is for the things of God and
Yeah.
ministry. But at its bare bones, I'm an entrepreneur, and I understand and define an entrepreneur as someone who solves problems. So my passion is to solve problems. My major problem I like to solve for people is helping them understand how to increase their value. And in terms of my business, my main business, which generates revenue for me, that's through means of property investment. So in a nutshell, I work with people who have problems. There's 9 particular cases of problems: people who need to migrate, people who have debts, etc., etc., people who've divorced, etc. I could go on,
Yeah.
but basically, I work with people who have problems and help them sell their properties very quickly.
Amazing.
I work with my wife. Again, it's an asset to work with your family. And basically, our key emphasis is being ethical. How can we ethically help and solve problems with a win-win-win solution? And side by side with obviously helping the people who have these particular problems, we also work with a group of investors and help those investors to generate better returns on their money. So, some of these investors have, certain amounts of money,
Yeah.
without divulging, where basically they sit that money in the bank, they make 1% over a period of a year, or the reality is a lot less than 1%. Whereas, lucratively investing that money through means of our organization or through means of us and deals that we are doing, they're able to make better returns. So bank beating returns is effectively our tagline for the investors we work with.
That's an amazing bio, and you pretty much covered a lot already in terms of like that introduction. But going back again, you said your main vehicle of business per se is property.
Yeah.
So why should I invest in property as in relations to all the other businesses that are out there? Why did you choose this particular vehicle, and why should me or anyone else choose property?
All right, so I'm gonna separate the question first, like
Yeah.
in terms of me, because you asked why did I choose this vehicle. For me, I chose the vehicle out of a sense of calling. I do believe, like, even from very early ages, I knew property was going to be for me. If I give you a personal story, when I was 11 years old, my mum was made redundant after working 15 years for a central bank in London. She was paying a mortgage on a very large 3-bedroom home. She's the mother of 4 boys. So you can imagine what that looked like.
Yeah.
Not having a second income earner in the house. I was 11. My oldest brother was probably 12, 13 at the time. And my other brothers are younger than me. So we're in this situation where my mum could go to a traditional estate agent. However, the thing with traditional estate agents is a lot of them are commission based and target driven. So what that means is if this month I've hit my target, I've sold enough properties to be okay with my manager or my regional manager, then I don't need to sell your house this month.
Yeah.
And if you're in a place of problem or you're in a place of urgency, I don't need to meet your urgency. It's actually easier for me to hold your house till next month and sell it next month. That's more profitable for me, because then next month I can start to hit my target. So for me, it was a sense of calling, and that's just a little story in terms of how I really saw this industry and saw people having problems in the first place. But in terms of answering, the heart of the question, why should you invest in property or why should someone else invest in property? There are so many reasons. Obviously, because I'm in the industry, like I'm fully immersed, I could reel off reasons. But one of the reasons I'd say, which is quite simple, is property is one of the easiest investment vehicles to understand. You know, it is actually one of the, everybody knows what a property is to start with. If I ask you what's a stock and you're not familiar with the stock market, it will take you some time to actually
But you know
understand.
what a house is.
That's it. You know what a house is.
Most
You know what
definitely.
rent is. You know, you understand, you know, automatically, just from living in the country, just from living in a house, etc., the common cornerstones of property, whether you understand the lucrative aspects or the creative aspects or how to leverage it to make money, that's different. But on the bare bones, most people already understand the framework or the criteria or the context of property. So that's first. The second thing is property, you know, statistically, you know, in terms of research and history, it's generally been the vehicle for the largest growth in wealth for all wealth builders across the world. I know definitely in first world countries like the US and the UK, and then secondarily for the retention of wealth. So if you're a person who wants to build wealth or you're a person who wants to retain wealth, property historically has been the primary vehicle in order to do that. So, you know, one of the things a mentor said to me when I was quite young, when I was around 19, 20, he said, the one thing we learn from history is that we do not learn from history. So that's what I find a lot of the time. People that are not in property, they're not learning from actual historical data. I'm not saying history always repeats itself, but I'm saying if you look back in history and you see that most people have built wealth through means of the vehicle of property, or most people...
Blueprints are there in essence. Yeah.
That's, you've said it. The blueprint is there. It's interesting you said that because I've released a blueprint. It's called the sourcing blueprint, to help people who want to start in property from a property sourcing perspective in terms of finding deals. So it's powerful you use that term, but you're right. In history, the blueprint is there. So if we leverage that, that puts us in a great position. So why should someone invest in property? It's a tangible asset. You know, I didn't even go into that, but it's a tangible asset. It's an asset that you can see, you can feel, you can touch. Secondarily, it's been used historically to build wealth and to retain wealth. And then additionally, the context is fairly understandable to even a novice, even a child.
Yeah, but I think one of the most difficult things when it comes to investing in property, well, the assumptions that we tend to make when it comes to investing in property, is that it takes a lot of capital to get into. So whenever I've had conversations with individuals who don't have properties, they're always like, well, I don't have 50k sitting in the bank to buy a property or to even get a mortgage, and my credit is poor. So what would you say to an individual like that? Because if we're having this discussion that property, or if you're making these statements that property is one of the best forms of investment and it's the best place to grow wealth and to maintain wealth, how would you go about getting into it if you don't have any initial money or any initial funds?
Now that's a beautiful question. And I've got so many answers coming to my head.
Yeah, and the reason I asked, because I know previously we had a discussion and you said one of the works that you're doing at the moment is creative investing.
Creative investing.
Yeah. So can you elaborate more on that?
So
the question?
Creative investing, I'll start with that. Creative investing is effectively just being creative about how you invest. So that might imply not using your own money, for example. Like, you know, one of the things I think I shared with you one of the last times we met up was about this burden in my heart around the word inheritance. And I started to understand in 2016 that inheritance is anything that you've received that you didn't work for. So that might be a pension that you're sitting on, which you could effectively legally release and start to invest in property. That might be equity that you're sitting on. You know, I think that where I'm going to with this in terms of simple sense is everybody has access to money.
Yeah.
The issue is not everybody A, understands they have access to money, or B, understands how to access the money they have access to. So that's the two things. Deep. You know, a story I was told once is, if I transfer £2 billion to your bank account, but you don't believe there's £2 billion in your account, you won't use your bank account as though there's £2 billion inside. So the first thing I would say is the issue is a mindset shift. So for me, you know, when I first got into property, a lot of time was spent shifting my mindset and helping me understand that I actually was already the recipient of a number of the investment that I needed. The only key for me was to learn to tap into it or to learn how to offer something. And to get really into the heart of what you've really asked in terms of, does property take a lot of money and is it an expensive vehicle to get involved in? You know, I heard something once, I believe it was Zig Ziglar who said it, a motivational speaker.
He's a legend.
And he said, service to many leads to greatness. Service to many leads to greatness. Now, why do I say that? Because, you know, if you want to get into an industry, like I'm very big on mentors. You know, I always speak about the mentors I've had in my life. And one of the things I'll say is go and serve. You know, like when I started in property, I started by serving. And what do I mean by serving? Did I work for free? No, not necessarily. But the business offering I started as a sole trader was a sourcing business. And in the UK, it's quite. I could go in depth if there's time permitted on the podcast, but in the UK, the activity of property sourcing is effectively going out there and finding opportunities, securing those opportunities. People define it differently, but for me, it's to find, secure, and then to sell on those opportunities.
Yeah.
So
does that require less capital?
well,
Or
you think about it. What does it cost you to find a shop that sells a plate? That's time, that's legwork.
Yeah.
Some people call it sweat equity.
Yeah.
So you are putting something in. There is no illusion around the fact that you will have to work.
With anything, it requires a certain element of sacrifice
There you
and
go.
work, whether that be capital or physical.
Excellent.
Sweat equity.
100%. You're totally correct. So, you may have to leverage sweat equity and put that in to start with. But the point I'm making is a sourcing business in its very fundamentalist constructs is a service business. Because if you find a property and you can agree a price with a seller and you can secure that legally and then sell that onto an investor for a fee, you are making a fee, but you're not effectively getting an investment. You're not going to obtain that property. You're not going to secure that property for yourself. You're not going to be making potentially rental income or the potential capital appreciation on that property. But you are making a fee. But the difference in terms of the whole scenario is you're serving. So because you're serving, you might create an opportunity where you can actually start working side by side with investors, where you're the go-to guy when that investor wants a new investment or a new asset. He's now coming directly to you. Now that can change the game for people. Like someone with no money, or let's not use the term no money because like I said, everybody's got access. But someone who's utilizing a very little amount of money, £300, £200, £20, £30, £10, £1 in order to start in this industry, but goes out with the heart to serve and says, you know what, I'm going to actually find opportunities for other investors. Because one of the things people don't appreciate, again, Zig Ziglar's sentence, service to many leads to greatness. When you start serving other people in an industry you actually want to get into, with an asset class you're actually wanting to build yourself, what you're actually doing is setting yourself up to gain experience without actually leveraging your own finances.
Yeah. You're learning on the go, basically.
There you go. With a very little investment potentially as well. So yeah, you're totally right.
No, that's amazing. One thing I wanted to touch on, I recently had a conversation with someone and I thought I'll speak to an expert in regards to this. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine who said he wants to buy a property, and he goes, property is always high yielding. Property always brings wealth. Property always brings money. So he's under this illusion that I won't call it an illusion until you're better off qualified to answer this question. But he feels like purchasing a property automatically means good investment.
Okay.
Is that the case? Because I was under the assumption that purchasing the property, prior to purchasing it, you would have done your calculations, your due diligence beforehand to see whether it was a profitable investment or not. Yeah. Because not every property is profitable. So
I don't know if you've answered the question yourself, but what I would say about that is there is this illusion that you can't go wrong buying property.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll use that as the slogan. And what I'd say is ask hundreds of thousands of people in both the US and the UK and other countries who bought and obviously were subject to the crash in 2007 and 2008. And
we all know someone that was,
there you go.
was affected by it.
There you go. And my answer to that is no. Like, I'm very cautious of these people who are these kind of, generalists. If I say this general, property is you never go wrong with property. The reality with property is like any other industry, you need to be educated. You need to have a deep understanding, or at least an understanding of how the industry works, what your place is in the industry. One of the things I break down to people like that I speak to in terms of my networking events, etc., is basically there's 3 ways you can make money in property. You can make money through cash flow. You can make money through profits. You can make money through equity. Now, when you understand that, I then began to, when I first understood that, to start to understand the biggest problem most people have who generalize and think property, you can't go wrong with property. The biggest problem most of them have is they don't understand those 3 clear, distinctive areas to generate income or generate money. So because they don't understand that, what they do is they go into every deal assuming they're going to make equity, assuming they're going to make profit and assuming they're going to make cash flow. Now, the reality is any person who laser focuses, there's this analogy, a light bulb spreads light in a whole room, but a laser can actually tear through stuff. A laser can tear through aluminium, steel, etc.
Some serious words there.
So that's just talking about the power of focus. Now, if I focus on cash flowing assets, I may have no intention for these assets to actually appreciate in value. If they appreciate in value, good. If they don't, who cares?
Yeah.
But if I focus on cash flowing assets, I'm focusing on one strand. So what that might allow me to do as someone who's learned in the industry is actually take full advantage of what property can offer me.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, I guess what I'm trying to say is, no, I don't believe personally that property is one of those you can't go wrong, and like I said, there's many victims from 2008, etc. But what I will say is that with regards to property, like I shared it at the beginning, because it's such an easy context to understand, if you can actually become educated through means of courses, there are specialist property investment trainers out there who train on courses, etc. But if you get yourself educated, you understand the marketplace, you can go and if I use this word, but you can go and dominate. You can go and dominate an area.
You have a heads up, don't you?
Definitely. Yeah. And education is key, and that's the reason you do this podcast. That's the reason why people work with other people to learn. That's why I believe in mentors. So
most definitely, and touching on the podcast as well. That's the reason why I'm sitting here with you, because it's not just an informative and educational for the audience, but it's also informative and educational for myself.
Certainly.
So speaking as a novice, like going out there and looking for property investments, what should I look out for? And instead of me instead of me making the assumptions like the example I just gave, what should I look out for to ensure that the purchase I'm going in for is the right one?
Okay, so
like what are some of the basic steps or some of the basic outlines that I should?
If you want me to give you some basics, this is not me. I'm not the creator of this, but the person who I think summarized some of the basics best is a man named Simon Zucci. So Simon Zucci's been in the property investment world for a very long time, and he's actually the director of the Property Investors Network, one of which I host in Canary Wharf. And he says that basically there's 5 key things you want to look for when you're looking at a property. And the first one is effectively you want to work with people that are motivated to sell. So you don't really want to be buying properties at the price everyone's buying. You want to effectively try to work with people who are motivated to sell, which gives you an opportunity to potentially buy at a better price if you can. So that's the first thing.
So that desperation, it kind of puts them in a position where they'll have to end up selling at a lower price than originally advertised.
I thank you for cutting me because because in doing that you give me the opportunity to actually broaden.
And I'm trying to understand as well, hence why I'm
firstly, for me, again, my business is all around being ethical, so I wouldn't see it as necessarily the desperation. But I was talking to someone earlier, a very prolific entrepreneur, and one of the things I said to this entrepreneur is, people like doing things on their own terms. And sometimes in life, problems cause people to have to make decisions they wouldn't have normally made. Now, what I usually break down to people is, in any process of a sell, whether it's, a motivated sell or an unmotivated sell, there are 3 key cornerstones. Those 3 key cornerstones are the money, the speed, and the certainty. The reason most people go to Tesco or Marks and Spencer's or Waitrose to shop is because they feel certain that Waitrose, Marks and Spencer's, Tesco will have what they're looking for. The next thing is, with all the marketing that these big brands do, they assume that it's going to be good for their money. And then they assume because the aisles are labeled well, etc., and the aisles are big and wide, that they'll have speed. So, big brands understand speed, certainty, and the price are basically key factors to any sell. Now, what happens with every human being is certain factors cause us to promote or value one or two of these constructs more than the other. So, for example, this is what I was sharing with the prolific entrepreneur that I was talking to earlier today. So, for example, if a person works in KPMG, and in KPMG, they've got a great apartment in Bermondsey, a 2-bedroom apartment in Bermondsey. They commute into the city. They love their life. And KPMG in London say to them, well, you know what? We want to offer you a position in San Francisco in another office. Now, they tell you that, look, In November is when the project in San Francisco starts. So you need to be able to move to in November.
Yeah.
Now this person owns this house. They're paying a mortgage on the 2-bed apartment in Bermondsey, but they now need to migrate. So migration is one of the situations I deal with in my business. Now, because they need to migrate and they need to migrate fairly urgently, again, they potentially now, if they don't have any family or anyone to potentially take over the management, they need to sell this property. Now, they may need to sell because they want to buy in San Francisco. They want to, start in San Francisco, whatever, the metrics. But the point is, there's 3 things of importance to them: speed, certainty, and the price.
Yeah.
Now, if the speed is of so much importance, so much value to them, that could make the price of less value to them. If the certainty of the buyer, so for example, if you're a first-time buyer and you're trying to buy this 2-bed apartment in Bermondsey, you might be like, yeah, I can buy this. But last minute, the mortgage provider might say, well, we're not willing to lend to you because you're a first-time buyer. Whereas if you're an investor who buys properties 2 a month, or you buy properties 1 a week, whatever level you're on. But if you're a certified investor who can leverage finance, or who has cash in the bank, if we just put it in the most simple construct so people can understand, I can go, knowing I've got the cash in the bank, 330K, I can buy this apartment right now. Now an estate agent might come and I've got videos on social media about market value, marketing value, and the difference between them. But an estate agent might come and give you what I call a marketing value and say, oh yeah, that apartment's worth 450. Yeah, now I don't believe in marketing values. I believe in market values. So a market value is the price that a person will pay all day long to buy that property. A marketing value, which is what an estate agent gives, is the price that they'll give you to put your property initially in the window. And anyone who sold a property knows it only takes a week, 2 weeks before that estate agent's calling you and saying, oh, we're not really getting calls at 450. How do you feel about us moving it down to 420 or 430? Or if we put it at 410, we'll get a lot of calls real quickly. Now, I might say to this vendor, look, the market value is 400. 400 is the price. If you put that in a window, you will have 3 or 4 people who want to buy it right now.
Yeah, straight away.
So the market price is 400. Forget the marketing value that we started with the agent, because that's a hope value. And the issue a lot of the time with the agent's approach is the agent will give you that 450 just so that the other 2 agents that come who give you 420 and 430 don't get your business. And then they sign you on an exclusivity mandate, and that mandate locks you in for 12 weeks.
So you can't advertise with anyone else within that period of time, basically.
There you go. And they then use that 12 weeks to convince you down from 450 to a more reasonable price of maybe the 410 or 400.
Yeah.
So these are, I don't want to call it games. There's lots of great agents out there. I work with agents myself, but this is the playing field that people are in when they
tricks of the trade, basically.
This is the industry.
Yeah.
So the issue with that is, I might come to someone's house and say, look, I got 330 that I can pay you today. And we might have to do, an exchange delay completion. There's hundreds of different approaches we can take to actually buy the property. But the point I'm making is, I might say to the actual vendor, look, I can pay you 450, but I'm going to pay you 450 over a period of 7 years, 10 years, where today I'll give you a 10% deposit of 45K. And that might be enough for him to migrate to start his new ventures in San Francisco. So the point I'm trying to make is, motivated sellers, is one thing. Trying to buy an asset where the price is not always the most important factor, but speed might be the most important factor.
Is that all part of like starting off on a good foot? So you know that you're not purchasing a property which has been overly valued. Yeah. So it's just basically getting in there knowing that you're making the right deal initially.
100%.
Yeah. And
if you overpay for anything, like you said, you already started on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
Just yesterday I did an interview on my, we have a Facebook group, and in that group I do interviews with other property investors. And one of the things the investor I was interviewing yesterday said, which was quite powerful, he just said it simply. He said, you make your money when you buy. Now that's
I've heard that quite a lot in terms
that's
of,
an old property adage. It's an old property adage that a lot of people who are very old school say, you make your money when you buy. So from Simon's 5 fundamentals, as it were, or 5 golden rules, number 1 is buy from motivated sellers, because in a way he's embedding that construct of you make your money when you buy.
You know.
So number 2 is you always buy in an area with good rental demand. Why is this important? Because, you know, in very simple terms, if there is a crash in the market, if interest rates do go up, if other factors come and sting you, because you bought in an area of very good rental demand, what that allows you to actually do is still generate rent whilst you need to hold that property through means of maybe a storm.
Yeah.
So buy with good rental demand. Another one of the 5 fundamentals or 5 golden rules is to basically make sure that you're cash flowing positive.
Yeah.
You know?
So, not sorry to cut you off, but
that's
so
cool.
touch on the previous point that you made. So, how do I know an area has high rental demand?
So there's
Like on a basic level.
Yeah, there's several different ways, but you know, if you say on a basic level, walk into your local estate agent
Yeah.
and ask them simple questions like, I've got an apartment. If you live in, if let's use somewhere else besides Bermondsey. Let's use Barking in East London, for example. You might have a 2-bedroom apartment in Barking. Walk into your local estate agents in Barking and just ask them, look, I've got a 2-bedroom apartment here. If I put it on the market with you, how many people would I have wanting to rent it? And at what price? You know, ask them those questions and they'll tell you. They might say to you, 2-bedroom in Barking, 1,100 a month, and you're gonna have 3 people who are ready. I've actually got a list of 8 people looking for something like that already. Or, you know, you're not gonna have anyone who wants that. In this area, we really have families who are looking. So really, if you've got a 3-bedroom, that's the asset that we're interested in. So the point I'm trying to make is there's gonna be certain property that's you know, red hot in certain areas, and there's going to be certain property that's really cold. You know, if you've got a bungalow in a certain area, that might not be as appealing to renters or to tenants as other kinds of apartments.
Yeah. So you touched on the second point, which would be to have a look at in your local area, speak to agents, and just try to figure out what the rental demand is within that area.
Yeah. So you wanna make sure effectively that you have strong rental demand. You know, and like I shared, you know, there's basic ways to do that, from checking your local estate agents. You know, check other things. You know, go to, you know, even these days you have news agents who have boards.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few of those, yeah, especially in East London.
There you go. And people say looking for a room. You know, some people say I've got a room to rent. You know, but look at those kind of things, because, you know, the signs are in front of everybody. You know, if you're in an area with strong rental demand, you know, that usually it tells itself.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a lot of development in the area, that could be an indication that the big companies, the big brands, the blue chips assume that there's a rental need in that area. So right now, as we speak, 2018, we've got excessive amounts of building going on throughout Canning Town in East London, and that's right next to Excel Exhibition Centre, where I do a lot of my work. And, you know, if you think of it from that perspective, you know, why am I gonna go and build a brand new hotel near Excel? Why am I gonna build a 20-story you know, development site? It's only because I believe there's a market for it.
Yeah.
So if big investors are doing that, then that, again, these are kind of other ways of looking at metrics for rental demand.
So that's an indicator within itself, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Transport links, etc. So yeah, there's so many ways you can break that down, but into the micro. But on a macro level, you know, there's estate agents you can speak to, you know, and there's even organizations you can speak to. You can go and speak to a local hospital, and say, you know, is there a process for housing, you know, your nurses, or a process for housing your junior doctors, your starting doctors, you know, etc. So
yeah, I think one thing I realized, I mean, in terms of the examples that you're giving, is when it comes down to business, a lot of it is all about being proactive
100%.
and going out there and seeking the information and doing the research and your due diligence, because
100%.
you're never really going to find anything sitting at home making assumptions. You're going to have to actively go out there in the community, speaking to the right individuals and sources to find out whether the area is profitable or not. So what would be the third thing to look out for? Because I know you mentioned there's 4 or 5 things to look out for when investing in property.
Perfect. So the third one is you need to be cash flowing positive.
Yeah.
Now, what do I mean by cash flowing positive? I'm going to break this down very simple. So you get people on occasion who, okay, I'm gonna share this because I think people need to know about this. So there's a term we use in the industry called the accidental landlord. Now, the accidental landlord, I'll tell you a quick story, is basically, there's a guy, let's call this guy Roger. Now, Roger owns an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment. You know, he's just finished his degree at 23 years old. He's now got his job as a software developer. Now, Roger's working as a software developer. You know, he's making great big bucks, 50K a year, etc. Now, Roger then meets Mandy. And Roger and Mandy, they start dating. They like each other. They want to get married. They get married. And Mandy also has a house. Let's say she's got a 2-bedroom house, a 2 up, 2 down in the local area. So they get married and they move in together. And when they move into Mandy's house.
Yeah.
So now they own Roger's apartment. Now, that scenario that I've just painted is what we call the accidental landlord scenario. Because Roger and Mandy now, they now have a rental property. They now say, oh, we got a spare house.
Yeah.
So with that spare house, they start usually renting it out, or they might sell it, whatever. But in many cases, people, like you said earlier, they think, can't go wrong with property, must be a great asset. So they start renting it out. So that syndrome or that scenario is called the accidental landlord. Now, the issue with the accidental landlord is they didn't buy for the purpose of investment. So, for example, they might get a tenant in that apartment, that 1-bedroom apartment, paying them £900 a month. Yeah, but their mortgage on that apartment might be £1,000 a month. Now, obviously, there's additional costs, but for the sake of keeping it simple, let's assume those costs, do not exist hypothetically. Now, what that means is Mandy and her husband are now paying an extra additional £100 every single month.
So that's cash flow negative.
So they're cash flow negative by minus £100 plus fees. So it's really more, but just in terms of simplicity. So for £100, they're basically losing every single month. Now, because they're not cash flowing property, the problem with that is they're not making a revenue on a month-to-month basis. Now, let's say, for example, whole new scenario that, they sold that apartment just because they didn't buy it as an investment, for example, and then they go and buy an apartment, and the apartment they buy, their mortgage on a monthly is £650, again, hypothetically excluding fees. Now, again, it's in a similar area, but the rent is not 900, but maybe the rent is 850. But the thing is, because they're paying $650, again, omitting fees, they're making £200 a month. Now, they're cash flowing positive. So that's the third of the rules. You want to be cash flowing positive just simply because of the simple fact that it puts you in a predicament where you're actually generating cash flow from the actual property. And cash flow is, like I said, it's only one of the 3 constructs. But for most people who work jobs, which is the majority of people, cash flow is a great asset to be able to have.
Especially passive cash flow when it's coming additionally from a different source as well.
Yeah, I'm not a big supporter of the term passive cash flow when it comes to property.
How comes?
Because
I hear the term a lot, and that's why I'm a user of the term, because it has the connotation that you're bringing in money which you're not actively working for or doing anything for. You've set up a system. Yeah. So what's the reason behind you not being a big fan?
Just the fact that there's 2 notions I try to stay away from. The main notion is get rich quick.
Yeah.
So obviously you've already alluded to it. You've, I guess, extrapolated it from a lot of things I've said in this podcast already. But, I believe people need to graft. I believe people need to work.
Most definitely, yeah.
So that's part of me. That's first and foremost, the first thing. Just, I don't want people to be under the illusion that it's a get rich quick scheme. And when we use the term passive, a lot of people have the notion, whether it's right or wrong,
you can
that
sleep and the money's flooding in.
They don't have to do anything. Like, I've got a property that comes to mind where, on a particular day every single month, we've got tenants paying us money. Now, this particular property comes to mind because it's the largest HMO that we own. It's the largest multi-let property we own. So we got 8 tenants in there. So effectively, I got 8 people paying me money from one particular product or one particular property, one particular asset, one particular entity every single month. Now, that makes you feel good, but it's not passive. Even if I have managers in terms of lettings agents managing the property, I need to manage my managers. So again, one of the things that was the biggest epiphany for me when I went into property is, and this is one of the things I share with people all the time, you need to make a decision whether you're going to be an amateur or a professional. If you're going to be a professional, yes, you will make money probably doing a lot less work than you do in your day job.
Yeah,
I will say that, but I just would stay away from the term passive myself because I don't want anyone to have the notion that, the money comes in and I do nothing.
Yeah. Well, what's the difference between being an amateur and a professional? So is being a professional taken on as a full-time responsibility and being an amateur is doing it part-time-ish?
Yeah, beautiful question. So not necessarily, it's not, being an amateur and being a professional has nothing to do with time. Being an amateur and being a professional has everything to do with conduct. So for example, how do you conduct yourself? Are you kind of nonchalant when it comes to your engagement with agents or your engagement with the marketplace. Like obviously having a sourcing business, one of the key cornerstones to our business is marketing.
Yeah.
Like we have to market regularly. We have to let people know that we are there to help them if they have a problem in terms of with property, or if they have a problem which their property being sold is an asset to them, or if they have a problem with the management of their property and getting someone else to manage it so it can become more hands-off for them. If that's a problem for people, we have to market. So for example, if I'm not marketing, then I'm being amateur because I know I'm supposed to market. If I am marketing, then I'm being closer to being a professional. If my marketing becomes systemized, where for example I've got certain things that just happen every month, whether I'm telling people to do it or I'm not.
Automating system.
Getting towards systemization, automation, those kind of things is where I would say people are moving towards being a professional rather than being an amateur. Like, are you trying to buy property? And I'm not saying business cards are a big thing or you need business cards, but do you have a business card? Like, an amateur will definitely 100% not have a business card. That's
but you never know when you're going to meet a client or possible opportunity. You might be on the train and be speaking to someone who desperately wants to sell their property.
There you go. So there's certain things we guarantee amateurs don't have. So for example, one of the biggest things, I'll make it very simple, and again, like I said, it's got nothing to do with time. So you can work a full-time job. When I started in the industry, I was working a full-time job. I was operating as a sole trader outside of my full-time work as a teacher, which is one of the reasons I love to give back, because I'm passionate about education and teaching. Now, when I say it's not about time, what I mean, for example, is, do you have a power team? Like for me, power teams is one of the biggest things I stress to people. Like, do you actually have a power team? Do you have a broker? Like for me, when I talk about power team, I break it down to what I call the team 10. And I've done videos before on the team 10, all the key 10 people I think you need if you're going to be serious about your property investing journey. But the point I mean is, if you've got a power team, if you've got a minimum of roughly like 10 people playing 10 key positions for you in your property game, then, or on your journey, then to me, you're a professional. Because you're working with other service providers who can push you along, who can help you to build momentum. A professional is going to start building momentum and fly on their momentum. An amateur is not going to build momentum, and that's why they're going to leave the game, lose the game, buy a lemon, as they say in the industry. Buy bad. Walk away. Get gazumped. And all the other terms that we could use. So
No, that's beautiful examples you're giving there. What would be so we just covered the third point. So what would be the fourth point?
Positive cash flow. So the fourth one is invest for long term. Invest for the long term.
It's not get rich quick scheme, is it?
You've got to be thinking long term. Like, it doesn't mean don't do short-term investment or don't do short-term projects, but invest primarily for the long term. Like, what are your long-term goals in the next 5, 10, 15 years? What kind of portfolio do you want to build? What kind of portfolio are you working on? So there's that. Like, in terms of me, just again sharing a bit of my journey, my end goal in terms of my property journey is 3 cities with 5 blocks of flats in each city. So that's 15 blocks of flats in total.
Is that like your personal goal?
No, it's not. It's my family goal.
Oh, okay.
And the reason it's my family goal is because with my family, there's 3 main things in our life we're focused on. Property is 1/3, ministry is 1/3, and then education is 1/3. So we have our long-term vision in terms of education is to create a federation of schools. So that's one school in the UK, a private school which teaches a Christian curriculum supplemented by entrepreneurship and enterprise.
Amazing.
So that's going to be 3 schools, one in the UK, hopefully in London, one in London, one in London, one in the West Indies, and one in Africa, and all 3 schools teaching the same curriculum. So how do we fund that? Now, because it's a private school, most people have the notion, you're gonna fund it with fees. No, we are gonna fund it ourselves through property revenue.
Okay.
And the reason we're making it a private school is so we can have more control over the curriculum. That's probably the only reason.
But we all paid for free schooling.
Effectively, like it will be a school that's autonomous in terms of its finances. Now, we may charge fees to those students who come. That's fine. We'll obviously have scholarship programs, etc., etc. But in terms of the nitty and gritty, that's maybe for another day. But because of the entity, because of the long-term vision we have in terms of setting up that federation of schools, we need to fund that. How are we going to fund that? These blocks of flats are going to fund that. So these 15 blocks of flats in these 3 different cities are going to, through means of cash flow, fund our educational endeavors. Through means of cash flow, fund our ministry endeavors. So we're not going out there in a simple term, begging people for money.
Yeah.
But we're actually empowering people. We're saying to people, look, we're not here for us. We're not here to pump us up. We're here to pump you up.
Yeah.
We're here to inject you with insight, education, knowledge, opportunities, creativity, etc. So that's our long goal. So it's the same thing in terms of property. You need to have a long-term vision. You have to invest for the long term. So for me, that helps me in several different ways. One of my mentors used to say to me, your vision determines who you hang around with. Your vision determines your hobbies. Your vision determines.
That's why I'm trying to get
friends.
to hang around with you more often now.
This is what my mentor said to me years ago when I was 21. He said to me, your vision determines who you allow to yourself to associate, what hobbies you have, etc.
Most definitely,
if you want to be around certain people, you might have to start playing golf. And you might think, golf's a silly game, but the reality is you might have to play golf because that's where your client or your long-term vision is.
The networking is as well.
There you go. So in saying that, it's like, because our long-term vision to start our federation of schools, to do more in terms of impacting 300 families on a regular basis through means of our ministry, we have to think long-term with property. We can't think, okay, let's buy a property, renovate it and sell it. Let's do that again, making 20,000 each time. Okay, after you've done that 100 times, you might have made 2 million. But the reality is 2 million going to fund an ongoing school project? So with my wife and I, in terms of our business, everything we do is about outliving ourselves. So, this is why I create resources. This is why I do videos. This is why I'm on social media. I don't do all of this stuff to promote me. I do all of this stuff to create ripples that will outlive me. Amazing. So if something was to happen to me tomorrow, the portfolio is still there. It's still going to be managed. It's still going to have its footing. If something was to happen to me tomorrow, the most recent book, The Sourcing Blueprint, that's still going to be available. The book I'm working on now, Powerfully Pursuing Purpose, that's a book that I'm currently writing. That book is gonna outlive me. Like I always think about the Bible, for example. Why use the vehicle of a book? Because a book can outlive people. Yeah. It can outlive its author.
Message remains, doesn't it?
There you go. So in terms of property, it's exactly the same. And I'm really grateful that, I learned that those 5 fundamentals, or, the 4 we've shared so far, from Simon, in terms of that 4th one. Invest for the long term. Think long term, because I had books locked up in me, but it wasn't until I engaged with the PIN community, if I'm going to be totally honest, and I heard those 5 fundamentals, that I started to understand that those books don't need to stay dormant in me. The education I have, the value I have and want to give to people doesn't need to stay dormant in me. It can come alive. It can be given to people. And if I use the right vehicles, i.e. video, social media, books, etc., it can actually outlive me. And that's where we get into legacy and actually leave an inheritance, which is what I touched on earlier as well.
That's beautifully said. I completely understand the long-term goal of things, but in terms of the short term, so let's say, for instance, I want to get into property now. I have all these wonderful long-term goals, but some people might feel like they still need a certain level of income to be coming in on a regular basis to maintain their lifestyle or just to survive in general. Is that where the cash flow side of things come in, and how do you set yourself up for the cash flow side of the
and that was rule number 3, buy for positive cash flow. So you're totally right. That is where cash flow comes in. Now, like I said earlier in the interview, there's 3 different ways to make money in property: cash flow, profits, and equity. Now, when you understand that, you can, like I said it earlier, you can get laser focused on one. So for example, if you're a person who wants to leave your job, I would encourage you to get laser focused on cash flow. Why would I encourage you to get laser focused on cash flow? Because if you do enough cash flow generating approaches in property, that can create a portfolio where what you're generating in cash flow, supersedes what you're getting currently on your salary. So for example, I mentioned the 8-bedroom property that we have earlier on. That 8-bedroom property in profit alone generates £1,400 a month. In terms of actual revenue, that property generates in the region of close to £4,500 every single month. When you exclude fees, etc., we're probably net walking away with £1,400. But a house, one property that generates £4,000 for you every single month, or if we keep it net, that generates £1,000 for you every single month. I guess the question you need to ask yourself is, how many of those do you need before you're in a financial position where you can say, if anything was to happen, like what happened to my mum, for example, if I was made redundant, I'm okay because I've got 3 of these properties which actually
So
replaces
you're setting those
income.
direct goals and really putting pen to paper and understanding what you want and what you need as an individual in terms of the amount of money that you want coming in.
There you go.
And then obviously the long-term goal in terms of like what your vision is
100%.
eventually.
100%. The way I do it is I work backwards. So I start with the long term because I think that's fundamental to where you want to go. I've heard this saying before: if you don't know your destination, all roads lead to there. Because if you don't know where you're going, you can go anywhere and you're going where you were going.
Yeah.
But if you have a fixed destination, and people change as well, so it's not that you can never change from your destination. But if you have that destination, what you can then do is answer the question they ask: how do you eat an elephant? They say 1 bite at a time. So you work all the way back now, and you say, okay, well, if the long-term vision is to have a portfolio that generates, let's say, £5,000 a month in the next 10, 15 years, then you can scale all the way back and say and ask yourself some pertinent and powerful questions. How many properties do I actually want to own as a human being? Do I want to own 1,000 properties, 500 properties, 2 properties, 3 properties? If your answer, for example, let's say...
How many do you want to own?
To be honest, like I want to own, I would say, less than 10 properties. Long term.
Yeah.
Long term, for myself, my wife, my children, I probably want to own less than 10 properties.
Is that individual properties or that could be 10 blocks?
No, in terms of my portfolio, less than 10 properties, like less than 10 units. I don't, like, for example, I shared with you, long term, I'm all about philanthropy. I'm all about our education and ministry work. So our business may be the controller of 15 blocks of flats. But in terms of my personal portfolio, if I own less than 10 properties, which are bought right, like this is something I share in my property investors network meetings in Canary Wharf every single month, for people to really be aware of, because I think this is very important. It's not about quantity. When it comes to property, it's about quality. The problem is a lot of people run after those who talk about they've got the quantity, but the reality is not about quantity. And I'll tell you a quick story to get this really honed in. So when I started my property sourcing business, the first client I had was, some people call him an advanced investor or whatever. You can call him all these big titles. But the reality is he owned 34 properties. Wow. Yeah. 34 properties across the UK. He had properties in Custom House in East London. He had properties in Ilford. He had properties very far in Liverpool. He had properties all across the UK, but his portfolio was 34 properties. Now, the powerful thing about this is, of his 34 properties, 18 of his properties were in negative equity. Now, not negative cash flow, negative equity. So what that means is he had bought them for more than the current market would pay for them. Yeah. So for example, let's say he bought 18 of these properties for 100 grand at the time he bought them. Right now, they're only worth 50 grand. Or let's be a bit nice, 60 grand. So in a way, he's kind of 40K negative on 18 properties. So
if he decided to sell those properties tomorrow, he's losing
money.
Loss.
He's losing money. Yeah. He's losing money. He's losing money to sell those properties. And this is the kind of problems in my business I actually solve for people. I show them ways, I work with them to find ways where they can actually offload those assets, and they're not in some cases, they're not even a liability to them. Or in some cases, they're not as much of a burden to them as they would have been if they offloaded them in a traditional sense. Now, the reason I share this guy's story is because I share this every single month in a Property Investors Network meeting, especially for those people that are brand new, that first client of mine with these 34 properties, 18 in negative equity, was the first real epiphany for me to understand that quantity is not what it's about in property. It's actually about quality. So for example, if one of his properties, and this is a typical thing, a lot of investors, even those who've been investing for years, a lot of them who don't have a specialized knowledge in their approach, they might be generating 200, 300, 400 pounds on a single property. Yeah. You got 34 properties. If we do the maths quickly, you got 10 properties. Make it simple. 10 properties generating 400 pound a month. Yeah. So that's 4,000 pound you're generating. Let's assume that's net. Now, I know the reality for most people, that's not even net.
That's not net, no.
For most people, that's the gross. But let's assume you got £400 net on 10 properties. That's £4,000 coming in a month. Now, I've already explained there's an 8-bed we've got, which net is generating £1,400 a month.
So that's from one property. Yeah.
So 4 of those, and I'm already surpassing this guy who's making £400 gross, but let's call it net on 10 properties. So again, it's not about quantity when it comes to property. It's not about the guy who stands up and says, you know, I've got the most property in the country. Now that is commendable, and I'd like to think the person with the most properties in the country or the largest portfolio generally is cash flowing. But from experience, I've seen that people with portfolios of more than 30 properties have the majority of their properties in, or can have the majority of their properties in negative equity. So you know, for me, it's not about quantity. It is about going back to some of the metrics you said, long term, etc. So personally, like I said, you know, if I own less than 10 properties in my personal portfolio, with each of them generating £1,000 or £1,000 plus, you know, that's a portfolio generating a net of over 10k a month. So a net of over 10k a month is more than enough money for most people to live whatever kind of life they want to live. And obviously, again, I'm a bit different. So, you know, I can answer that question and say, yeah, I want a portfolio of less than 10 properties, or 10 properties is kind of a good cap for me. But the reality is, obviously, if my business owns 15 blocks of flats, then if those 15 blocks of flats are all, you know, whatever, like let's say 10 unit blocks, then that's 150 units that my business owns.
But that's completely separate to your own personal portfolio.
Yeah, in terms of
business, a different entity.
In terms of legalities, you know, but really someone else could argue, well, Samuel, you own 150 plus your 10, so really you own 160. So, you know, all of this stuff can be broken down in different ways.
Why do you class the business separate entity to yourself, even though it would be under you as your business? Like,
yeah, that's a good question. I guess
is that a strategic thing? Is that personal?
Is that a strategic thing? The thing is, yeah, of course it's strategic. You know, of course it's strategic. You know, people have been doing this for years. Again, you know, like I said, you know, history teaches us a lot of things. Like there's people that have gone bankrupt. You know, I guess one of the great examples of that, who everybody would know, again, it maybe in terms of a short story, is the current president of the United States of America. You know, the current president of the United States of America. This is a man who's gone bust in terms of millions of pounds, but today he's a multi-billionaire, whatever you want to call him. You choose the tag, it will probably fit. You know, and now he's the president as well. So, you know, it's not to say my views are positive or negative about him, but it's just to give an indication that having certain things like a company entity for some people can be very profitable. That can protect you at times of a storm, you know, or that can allow you to walk away without being scathed through means of certain situations, you know. And again, you know, I'm not a business business structure professional or anything like that. You know, I'm just an investor. I'm a property investor. As I said earlier, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a person who has a passion to give value to other people. But I've seen how utilizing the vehicle of companies and company structures can help you. You know, when we think of all the biggest earners in the world, you know, if you know, he's late now, but if I use the term Steve Jobs, you know, the next thing people are going to say is Apple. You know, why is that? That's the company that he built, you know, and it goes on and on. If I say Bill Gates, people say Windows, you know, it's these are the companies these people built. And it's not to say that, you know, you can't do it without a company or anything. It's just to say that there's certain structures that work for certain people. And for me, when I look at the Warren Buffetts of the world, you know, the structures they use a business, a company trust.
That's another great example of you following the blueprint that's already been set prior.
Yeah, I don't need to reinvent anything that's been created in a great enough fashion for me to learn and leverage. So that's me. I'm always about learning and leverage. Just make sure you're learning from the right sources. So.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So what's the final point then? What's the fifth and final thing to look out for when starting up in the game?
From Simon's list, you know, the fifth thing, and again, it is a plug. I've got value from it, so I will plug it. But Simon's book, Property Magic, you know, if you go through certain portals, you might even get the book absolutely free. But Simon's book, Property Magic, explains these 5 fundamentals in a very in-depth fashion. And again, I'm sharing this only because I believe in the principle of giving honor where honor's due. I didn't create these 5 fundamentals. They're just 5 fundamentals.
And they've worked for you as well.
They work for me. Not only they've worked for me, they work for me. They're working for me. They're gonna work for me. So they're gonna work for me as well. They're gonna work for you. You know, as a viewer, as a listener, they're gonna work for you if you're diligent in terms of utilizing them. And remember, we've been speaking about this for quite some time, but remember, you said these are basic. You're looking for basics. These are basics. I could go much more in depth, be more technical, but the reality is these basics, they work. And I found them through means of Simon Zucci and his book Property Magic. So again, you know, maybe get the book and you can go more in depth in terms of what they offer. But very simply, the fifth fundamental, the fifth golden rule that Simon shares is buy with a cash buffer. And, you know, to break this down, this is, for me, in my practical experience in the industry, I've seen this to be the biggest downfall of most of the people I've worked with in terms of the properties I've been able to source and sell to other people. And what do I mean by that? So, you know, when you buy a property, let's say you're buying a property as an investment. Let's say I buy a 3-bedroom house in East Ham. Now, East Ham in East London, a 3-bedroom house there, I was looking at one the other day. Let's say I paid $390 for it. I got a reasonable deal and I paid $390. Now, what a lot of people would do is buy that house, get it ready, rent it out, and that's done. And because they're making that £400 every single month we spoke about earlier, you know, they're happy. They think they've solved the woes of the world. Yeah. So as I was saying, you know, you get these people that, you know, buy this house. Let's just create the scenario. So Timothy goes and with his wife Tina. Timothy and Tina go and buy this 3-bedroom house in East Ham. I was looking at one recently, a good price, let's say $390. So they've bought this for $390. They've refurbed it for $20K. They're all in at $410, again excluding fees to make it easy. Yeah. And let's just say that, you know, they're getting that £400 a month. And by the end of the year, 12 months, they've got 4,800 that's come in. And to them, it's like, wow, you know, we've invested in property, we've done a great deal. Then next year happens, you know, same thing, 4.8, full occupancy, 100%, tenants were paying. Cool, another 4.8, they're chilling. Year 3, same thing, wow, they're chilling. Halfway through year 4, you know, they've got, instead of the 4.8 so far, they've got £2,400, half the rent because the year's not over. And the tenants say they're moving out. 2 months later, the tenants are out. They get an extra £800 on top of their 2.4. So now they're at 3.2 in terms of year 4. So 4.8 year 1, 4.8 year 2, 4.8 year 3, 3.2 year 4, and the tenants move out. Now, there's this term we use in property. We talk about tenant turnover. Yeah. But the reality is, if you've had a family, you know, Tim and Tina have had a family living in their house or in their rental property for 4 years, that house is going to have wear and tear. That house is going to have a number of issues potentially that these people had for 4 years and didn't fix, or maybe did fix and didn't fix properly, or fixed, you know, the way that you'd fix because you lived there, rather than the way that a professional would fix. So they might have a drain, for example, at the back of the house, which has just been leaking, or a gutter, which has been leaking. As a result, there's a green, black, and white stain on the wall, where it's now started to penetrate the wall. And now inside the house, you got damp, for example. Now, the reason I create this story or share this story about Tim and Tina is because of the very simple fact that how, if there's no cash buffer, is Tim and Tina going to get this house rent ready again? How are they now going to have funds to get the house back to an optimum position? And again, you got to remember, we're 4 years in the future. Yeah. So even the decor, they might have gone for the magnolia. It's
old school now.
Yeah, they might have gone for the magnolia, where right now magnolia's not in. Yeah. So what are they going to do to get their house rent ready? And the answer is they're going to need a cash buffer. So the fifth of the 5 golden rules is have a cash buffer. Whenever you go and get an investment property, just make sure you got a cash buffer, whether it's $5,000, $6,000.
Is this a cash buffer that you save beforehand, or is this a cash buffer that you build up as you're renting out the property?
I would say that obviously the first is ideal, and the second is not as ideal, but the second is, it could be a cash buffer if you get there. You know, obviously if you have 6 months of tenancy and then tenants move out and they've wrecked your place in 6 months, or they didn't pay rent for 6 months, for example, then having had a cash buffer before you started will help you, because you didn't have rent for the last 6 months. So presumably you wouldn't have been able to build that up. So again, it's all about thinking about it, you know, in terms of what makes sense or what's wisdom for you. I would say if you can go in with a cash buffer, you're in an advantageous position, because of the fact that you know you're ready to go. And you know, there's small things you can do like swap outs, you know, and a simple ideology in terms of a swap out is, I've got my little £5,000 waiting as my cash buffer on the property. I get paid my 4.8 throughout year 1, and what I do is I just take that 4.8 and use it to swap out 4.8 of the cash buffer. Yeah. You know, so really year 1, did I make any profit? No. Year 1, I just built up the majority of my cash buffer. Year 2, my first £400 completes my £5,000 cash buffer. But my £5,000 that was my cash buffer, I can now go and use it for whatever else, buying a new property, part of a new deposit, investing with another organization, whatever it is, going on holiday if that's what you like. I can now utilize those funds. So again, you know, you can be creative with it, you know, but the point is it's more advantageous if you have it when you go in. If you don't have it when you go in, you know, again, you can be creative and you can store it up over time.
No, it's been absolutely amazing. And these 5 pointers you've given are of fantastic value to anyone wanting to get into property, any young investors out there. But what would be, if you was to give 2 pieces of advice to a young aspiring investor or property investor or business person or entrepreneur, it doesn't necessarily have to be about property in essence. What would be those 2 pieces of advice be based on your experience that you've had in your years of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think that's a powerful question. I think the first answer I would give is start now.
Yeah.
You know, start now. And, you know, everybody, I believe, has heard the statement, time waits for no man. You know, start now. You know, if you start writing that book today, you will hopefully be one day closer to finishing it than if you start tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, start now. You know, I've heard people say tomorrow's not promised. You know, there's all these catchphrases, slogans I could use, but the reality is, I would say start.
They're all non-progressive, aren't they?
There
When you
go.
really look deep into it, I realize that none of them are really progressive.
There you go. Start now. You know, because what I found for myself is that in 2005 is when I really got interested in property in terms of actively, and I wanted to do something. And the way I wanted to get in is I was going to do my first degree. I had student loan money. I didn't move out of my home. I was living with my parent, and I said to my dad, I said, Dad, look, I got this student loan money. Let's invest in property. You know, and my dad said, now's not the right time. You know, now the issue is I didn't know better questions at that point. I should have asked a better question like, okay, so when's the right time? And that would have helped me understand that, you know, nobody knows the future. So if nobody knows the future, start now. You know, but the reality was I didn't start in 2005 as actively as I could have or should have, in my opinion. I'm not a person who lives with regret, but I've learned from that. And I realized that taking action, you know, I've got a slogan. It's on my website, SamuelIkhinmwin.com. But, you know, the slogan's there in big writing. It says, action begets action. You know, that's one of my key slogans. I always say it to myself, action begets action. You know, me being here on this podcast will cause me to take other action. You know, me doing the interview I did yesterday will cause me to take other action. Me going out and having a flyer campaign where my leaflets go out to 4,000 properties in an area in East London will cause me to take other action. Even if it's just the fact someone calls me and I have to take the action of answering my phone to say, hi, yeah, this is Samuel. I help people sell properties quickly or whatever. The point is action begets action. So the first advice I'd give to someone who's starting out as an entrepreneur or very interested in going into property investment is start today, start now. The second thing I would say is basically align yourself with people who know what they're doing. You know, people who know what they're doing and who are willing to give you that insight. You know, again, this is something I learned from a mentor when I was very, very young. I think I was 18, 19. And what the mentor said to me is, Samuel, why take 70 years to learn what you can learn in 7 hours from reading the book of someone who took 70 years to learn it? And that stays with me, and it's going to stay with me till the day I die. And this is the reason why I want to write books or write more books. This is the reason why I like giving value. This is the reason why I always think about capturing my value in ways that can outlive me, because I always think to myself, I now want to do for the community, for people, for investors, for others, what was done for me. You know, I want to provide that blueprint. I want to provide that manual. I want to provide that resource. I want to provide that insight. I want to provide that eureka moment or whatever else it is for other people to be like, oh, you know what? I was watching this guy's video and I realized I can do it. Or I was watching this guy's video and I realized I should do it. Or I was watching this guy's video and I see the game plan. I see how we can do it with very little resources, or physically or financially or whatever. So for me, there will be the 2 takeaways that I would definitely say to anyone who's budding and wanting to start up. First thing, start now. And second thing, align yourself with people who know what they're doing and who can help you. And, you know, if you think I'm one of those people, if you think my values resonates with your values, because I think that's a very key thing to start with, making sure there's congruence in values. Because what happens is you can have someone who has all the knowledge you want and all the knowledge you need to be successful. However, their values are not congruent with your values. And the problem with that is that starts taking you on a different journey long term. You know, so for example, I remember when I wanted to be very active in terms of learning about property, there were 2 potential organizations that I considered going with. And, you know, I'm not a proud person. I like to operate in a very humble manner. And I just remember that although I don't believe one of the organizations is a very proud organization, they were very strong on using what I believe are pride metrics in terms of their marketing.
Okay.
In terms of, these are the cars we drive.
Yeah.
This is how big our portfolio
image based.
is. It was very, very material based marketing. Now, again, you know, I've had the fortune of meeting the people at the top of that organization, and like I've said, I don't believe necessarily they are pride based in that sense. That it's not all about ego and materialism.
Yeah.
But because they led with that marketing, that was for me the indication that I didn't want to go with them in terms of my training. And again, it's not to say to anyone do or don't. It's just to say to people, my core value in that is align yourself with people whose values are similar to your values.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I drove up today to this interview in an Aston Martin, it's not something I want to talk about. You know, it's just, that's the vehicle I used to get here. If I drove here in a Mini Cooper, it's not something I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is how I can add value to people. So I generally try to align myself with people like that, people who are not about, this is what I've got and this is what I've been able to do, but people who are more so about, this is how I can help you, you know, and this is what I've got to help you.
And in saying so, I know personally from attending your event that you host a event called PIN. Can you tell us a bit more about PIN just before we call it a day? So just elaborate more about what PIN is about and the networking programs that you hold and how people can meet those individuals who you just discussed in terms of aligning yourself with the right individuals to start your journey.
That's powerful. I didn't even connect the two, so thank you for doing that. That's powerful. But basically, I'm the host of one of the Property Investors Network meetings. So these are, I host one of 50 plus meetings which take place across the UK every single month, except for in August and December. So in August we break because obviously even property investors need a holiday, and in December the same. So basically it's been great this month having a month off of doing the networking event, because it's allowed me to get in and do things like this, interview, etc. So with PIN, PIN standing for Property Investors Network, it's an organization that was founded originally by Simon Zucchi in 2003, and it's all about helping people who are in the property industry, whether beginners or very advanced, to basically network with other people in the industry. And Simon started it because he found that his property investing journey when he started was very lonely. Yes, he might speak to his solicitor, yes, he might speak to his broker, but besides that, it was very disjointed. And he wanted basically to create a community of people that could work together, encourage each other, etc. And as you mentioned, you know, you've obviously attended those meetings and seen the kind of camaraderie that we basically facilitate. So, you know, up until last month, I was hosting two of those meetings, one in Watford, which has now been passed on to a new set of hosts, and then additionally the one in Canary Wharf, which I continue to host. So the Canary Wharf PIN, if you're interested in attending, you can go to www.canarywharfpin.co.uk and you can see kind of what we're doing there. But in a nutshell, what we do is every single month we host two different speakers, and these particular speakers are very advanced property investors. So these are people that have been investing for a number of time with great portfolios, you know, and I'm an avid student, so I'm always there listening and learning, even though I host the event. And basically what happens in the event is we allow you to have two presentations, one which is a 25-minute presentation from one of the speakers, and then the longer presentations, a 45-minute presentation from another speaker. And then riddled in between that, we have a networking break for people to network with one another. We have a service providers opportunity where people in the room can stand up and share for 20 seconds a service or opportunity they have to basically share, which could be of benefit to other people in the room, as well as a lot of other things. We have informal networking from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So, you know, it's an amazing event. It takes place on the first Thursday of every single month, except for August and December. And yeah, if you can come down and connect with me. Additionally, if you're interested in property sourcing specifically, and if you're a person who thinks, you know what, I've heard what you said today, Samuel, and I'd really like to get into property sourcing, you can go to the website www.sourcingblueprint.com, www.sourcingblueprint.com. And what I've done there is I've put there a publication, an e-publication, an electronic publication that can be sent to you via email, or it can be downloaded, one of the two, where basically that will give you some insights into the power of the four core constructs that I find to be, fundamental to growing, starting and building a property sourcing business as well. So
that's amazing. And I'll definitely be an advocate of people attending your meetings. I've been there myself. I know the true value that it holds coming there, and the fantastic individuals you meet as well in terms of like the networking side of things. So Samuel, it's been an absolutely pleasure having you on today, and I'm definitely going to have you back, and we're going to delve into a bit more deeper into property, some of the more technical sides of things. But we started off today as an initial introduction to who you are and some of the basics in regards to getting into property. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and really appreciate having you on today.
Thank you for having me, Francis. It's been a pleasure to be here as well, and
Cool.
Thank you to the viewers as well, viewers and listeners.
Cool. Stay blessed.